U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said the war against Iran is not an effort to build democracy in the Islamic Republic. Speaking at the Pentagon, Hegseth insisted the conflict with Iran was not an endless war, nor was it comparable to the United States war in Iraq. He said the U.S. mission was to destroy the regime's missiles, navy, and deny Tehran nuclear weapons. Take a listen.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes.
Well, to talk more about this, I'm joined on set by Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator. Hi, Doug. This is the first time that Pete Hegseth has given a conference at the Pentagon in months, isn't it?
Yeah. Before we get into actually what he said, there is a headline in the fact that he was up there at the Pentagon giving a press conference. You have to go back 3 months to December 2nd. 2025, for the last press briefing, last news conference that Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Defense Secretary, gave to reporters. And what's even more interesting is at that press briefing, back in early December, December 2nd, it came shortly after the Pentagon had instituted a new press policy, basically effectively clamping down on journalists' access to the Pentagon. You might remember at the time, we spoke about this, what happened as a result of those new restrictions unilaterally laid down on reporters. Well, reporters at quality news organizations, as I would call them, decided we are not submitting to the diktat of the Pentagon on journalistic access, which is a right of the people and of the journalism as the fourth estate to be able to inform the American public. We need access to the Pentagon. If we're going to have these restrictions, we're out of here. So a lot of journalists decamped from the Pentagon. They have been back. And what you have today, effectively, at this press briefing today is Pentagon, which is staffed not entirely, not exclusively, some good, dedicated journalists stayed, but with a lot of people who are lobbing fastballs now at the U.S. Defense Secretary. That is questions that will be more, I guess, amenable to the Trump administration and more on the same page and less challenging. And that's a lot of. So we did hear a lot of very unchallenging questions today. And I will say that the last time that he actually gave a press briefing alongside the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, you have to go all the way back to June for that. And why is that a significant date? Because as you remember, perhaps last June was when the U.S. joined Israel in the so-called 12-day war against Iran. And this is, in a sense, a resumption of unfinished business from Israel and the U.S. standpoint. So, yeah, not to overstate the case, but it is a headline in and of itself that Pete Hegseth chose to step up to the podium today to give a press briefing to a newsroom which was, if not exclusively, predominantly packed with journalists who are favorable to the cause and the playbook of the Trump administration.
All right, so did we get any extra clarity on these operations in Iran from what the Secretary of Defense said?
Well, Pete Hegseth was scornful of journalists who suggested that he wasn't being clear. He said this is not the endless war, as you said at the outset. He said he was very clear this is not in Iraq. He didn't say Afghanistan. He said this is not in Iraq. And he was also clear-eyed that he couldn't give clear objectives because it's too early on. And unlike, a lot of those other softer previous administrations where they tell you everything that's going on in the military campaign, he says, no, we're not going to tip our hand. We're not going to tell you everything. And we're not going to give the enemy information they don't need. But what I found noteworthy here is while he said this is not a, quote, regime change war, effectively, on the very first shots of this war, the very first day, you had regime change in the sense that the supreme leader of Iran was knocked out practically on the first strike of the war. And Pete Hegseth acknowledged, well, this isn't a regime change war, but he acknowledged that the regime sure has changed. Perhaps that's supposed to be a little bit, lighthearted or funny. But the fact of the matter is he didn't really give a clear plan of what the plan is for the future. And that is notable because in this conference, if you were seeking clarity, while he said it's not an endless war, it's not going to be regime change, he didn't really explain why the Trump administration seems to be convinced and believes that this is not going to go the way of Iraq and Afghanistan.
I'll just cut you